So, hello everybody, and welcome to the next in my series of VOD reviews, which is going to be from the Demacia Cup Grand Finals, which took place in China last weekend. So, for those of you who don't know what the Demacia Cup is, the Demacia Cup is sort of like the FA Cup or the March Madness of Chinese League of Legends. All of the LPL teams, the 12 LPL teams and the 16 LSPL teams are invited, and they play a single elimination tournament. And there are two tournaments, one in spring and one in summer, and the top two teams from each tournament qualify for the grand finals. And the grand finals is a reasonably large event in the Chinese League of Legends calendar. It's the event which happens to close the season, and it's a big weekend event. And on the semi-finals happen on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday morning they have the award ceremonies for the star players in each position, MVPs in each position, overall league MVP, fan votes, top staff positions, etc. And then they have the grand finals, and then that's the formal closing of season 5 and the end of season 5 in China. So how does the format work? So the top two teams who win the spring tournament and the top two teams from the summer tournament qualify for the grand finals. Now, Edward Gaming won both tournaments this year, so because Edward Gaming had already qualified from spring, their number two the invitations passed down from Edward Gaming to OMG and Snake. OMG finished second, and Snake finished third. So the summer first seed became OMG, and the summer second seed became Snake Gaming. And from spring, you had Edward Gaming, and second place was IG Invictus Gaming. So the first semi-final was between Edward Gaming and Snake. The second semi-final was between Invictus and OMG, and I'm going to go and cover what I think are the most important games from each series. So, and then I will do a general roundup on the article, maybe through Reddit, maybe through somewhere else. Of course, I'm not allowed to link to any Reddit articles, but anyway, this is basically the VOD review of the game. For Edward Gaming versus Snake, I think that there were two key games. There was the first game which I'm going to cover here, and the second game which I'm going to cover in the next video in the series, which I will release immediately after I've done this one. So, as a brief background, because I haven't done many videos on China before, Edward Gaming have sort of been the most consistent team in the LPL over the last two seasons. So they're coached by Aaron, one of the best, sort of most experienced coaches in the game, and Edward Gaming play a very solid, strategic, objective-focused approach, centered around getting their sort of AD carry Deft ahead in the laning phase. And as Deft is more of a team fight AD carry rather than sort of a dominant lane AD carry, Edward Gaming can sometimes be quite passive in the early game. And sort of if they get their leads to snowball the game, these tend to come from their mid or their top lane. So because they're quite passive in the early game, this means they deprioritize early dragons and try to outsmart and out-rotate the teams using the very intelligent sort of map control pressure of Clearlove, who's their jungler, and Mako, who's their support. And amongst the best players in the world at their positions because of how strong their vision control is. They then attempt to trade objectives in the early game, and then they play around Baron using very strong vision denial around Baron to generally force face checks or take quick Barons, and then they use this. So they're Baron focused team, and they tend to play passive in the early game until about 15-20 minutes, and then they start to play more aggressively and they get into the game. But they use very clever first 5 minutes of the game in order to be able to trade objectives early, and they play the lane swap very, very well. Snake sort of lack the macro strategic intelligence of Edward Gaming, but make up for it by being arguably the best 5v5 team fighting team in the whole of the LPL. Their team is basically built around Flandre, who's a hyper-aggressive, super mechanically gifted top laner. So think something like Huni sort of on steroids. And generally sort of Snake's entire early game strategy is focused on getting him ahead in the laning phase. And Flandre is a very talented player. He has a number of non-standard top lane picks, such as Fizz and Morgana, but is equally competent at playing sort of the meta. He likes to play in particular Hecarim, Maokai, and Na. Apart from Flandre, the rest of Snake are generally quite passive, although mid laner Yu, who played for Edward Gaming throughout Season 4 before he was replaced by Pawn, can occasionally sort of make plays on assassins such as LeBlanc or Yasuo, although he's much more comfortable on control mages mid, and in particular Azir. Snake, as a team, sort of as a unit in team fights, are extremely good at playing around enemy cooldowns and recognizing opportunities to flank and punish slight mispositioning errors in ways that few other teams are equipped to do so. So what they will do is they will have a primary engage where they sort of bait cooldowns from the enemy team, disengage, and then immediately go back in once at an appropriate time for the cooldowns. So this is something I'll cover too when we get into fights, and it makes Snake an extremely good team fighting team. Whereas Edward Gaming are more sort of a macro team, but both teams are quite passive in the early game. Okay, so let's go into game one. I'm going to do VOD reviews of game 1 and game 2 in the series because I think those are the most important. This was a best of 5 series, and it went to 5 games, and Edward Gaming won 3-2. But game 1 was, well, I won't spoil too much about who won each individual game, but game 1 highlighted some strengths of one particular team, and game 2 highlighted the strengths of the other team. Okay, so let's go into pick ban. So this game was played on patch 5.21. So the main OPs are Tahm Kench, Elise, Kindred, Lulu, Kalista, and Gangplank. So these bans here, as we see at the bottom, sort of cover the sort of OPs on this patch, except that Edward Gaming elect to ban Azir as a target ban against Yu, who's extremely good on Azir, instead of Lulu, who they end up first picking. And I think game 1 was a very, very strong win for Edward Gaming in pick ban, mainly due to 2 poor picks from Snake. So Edward Gaming first picked the Lulu, and this sets themselves up to play a hyper carry team composition, and they followed up with double disengage from support and jungle. So 2 champions who are very, very, very solid disengage. Which again, this plays into the whole idea of they have the super carry, the hyper carry, superstar, AD carry, marksman, deft. Okay, and this sort of a first 2 picks sets them up to go and to do this. Snake respond by picking Rek'Sai, which is a sensible champion to prioritize for a team who likes to gamp top early and support the split push late. However, by picking Tristana on first rotation rather than, say, Alistar, they commit themselves to playing a late game hyper carry team composition, because that's the sort of team composition that Tristana excels in, against a team that has Lulu and is almost certain to take Gragas. So they have very strong disengage from the jungle. So they've committed themselves into playing a hyper carry against hyper carry composition, except that their team is going to be worse at it because Edward Gaming are going to have the Lulu. So Edward Gaming round out their composition sort of with this double disengage as a result. So they punish the snake mispick here, and they round out their composition with a hyper carry in Kog'Maw, and take Hecarim to preempt a top lane carry from Flandre, as well as a champion which can sort of be a primary engage late game. So Kog'Maw in this composition is a very strong counter to what Snake are trying to do, because although Kog'Maw loses the early game pushing war to Tristana, either in the duo lane or in the lane swap, once Kog'Maw reaches his Triforce power spike around 15 minutes, he outscales Tristana for the rest of the game, providing his team can peel for him properly. So of course Kog'Maw doesn't have an escape, but with this triple disengage in the team composition, Kog'Maw is going to have a large amount of peel. And once Kog'Maw reaches his Triforce power spike, he's pretty much stronger than Tristana throughout the rest of the game, even until 6 items. But of course, Tristana does have the early game advantage. So the first mistake here from Snake was committing themselves into playing a hyper carry AD carry rather than something earlier games such as Sivir, which Crystal, who is the AD carry, who is pretty strong at playing. But I'm just going to talk about this last pick here, this Riven pick here, which I feel is the second mistake that Snake make in this pick ban. So they give up the perfect sort of Juggernaut composition, and what Snake really need in this last position here is a split pusher that can beat Hecarim late game, so that they can spread out the map and force Edward Gaming to break up their Deathball composition. Because I mean, to put it frankly, there's almost no team fighting composition in the entire game that is going to be able to sort of team fight this. Now, this puts Snake... So either they need to pick a very, very strong split push champion, or they need to pick something which can force engages and force team fights and get onto this cog more. Now, they've got Lissandra, which can do this, but the problem with having Lissandra as your primary engage is, firstly, Lissandra has a very, very telegraphed engage, so Lulu can easily speed up Cogmore to get away from it. And secondly, even if Lissandra does manage to get an engage on the Cogmore, Gragas and Alistair can easily knock the rest of the damage dealers in the team away. So what you really need if you want to fight this is you want to have a primary engage. Now, Hecarim would be a great pick, but of course Hecarim's taken. And the problem here is Flandre doesn't really play Malphite. I mean, basically, Malphite would have been pretty good in the Snake team composition. They could have used Malphite to get onto the Cogmore, followed up with Lissandra and Braum, and had a very sort of solid team fight. But of course, this doesn't play into the carry top style of play that Snake like to play. So they end up picking Riven. Oh, and sorry, the obvious split pusher, if we've learnt anything from Worlds, to pick against sort of Hecarim is Fiora. Now, Flandre does play Fiora, but he's not a great Fiora. So this is Edward Gaming really sort of exploiting Snake's champion pool a little bit here. So what ends up happening is that Snake take Riven, sort of a champion which isn't really great at dueling Hecarim early, because most Hecarims are going to take Ignite. He can't really chase or run away effectively from Hecarim in the late game. So he can all-in Hecarim, but Hecarim can still disengage and still get away. And in fact, many pros consider Hecarim to be a counter to Riven, so they pick Riven into a counter matchup. And this is something that the Chinese commentators basically discuss at length, and they talk about Huni and Huni's thoughts on picking different champions. So, for instance, using Riven as a Fiora counter pick, and then Hecarim as a Riven counter pick. So it's also a champion which doesn't really provide the reliable sort of primary engage on Edward Gaming's backline that they need. So they're going to be heavily reliant on flanks if Snake expect to win any sort of team fight. And although it is possible for Snake to win team fights in this game, they're either going to have to force Edward Gaming into taking questionable fights in the jungle, where Snake's composition can better utilize their zone control from Lissandra and the mobility that they get from Riven, Lissandra, and Rek'Sai, and indeed Tristana over sort of jungle pathways and jungle bushes. Or they're going to be relying on a very strong Riven flank late game, so Riven flank into Lissandra follow-up. And this is going to be almost impossible without a great sort of flash through Gragas and Alistair disengage. Yeah, so I mean, this is how Snake need to sort of win the game, but I think that this is a very questionable pick ban from Snake, especially this Tristana first pick, and to a lesser extent the Riven. But I mean, with Riven, you need to invest resources into getting her ahead early, and Snake are definitely a team which do invest resources into their top lane. Okay, so let's go and get into the game. So. So, Snake invade immediately as 5, and they get an immediate 20 gold advantage, first one killing this ward, and the ward later. However, sort of the advantages of early vision are quite limited in this game, as Snake are going to have an advantage of bot lane matchup or pushing advantage in the lane swap, and they're going to be disadvantaged in top, whether the early game comes down to lane swap or sort of standard lanes. So they get their 5-man invade, they get their deep vision down, and Edward Gaming get their vision down too. So I'm just going to pause here quick. Now this ward here from Koro is a ward which I really, really don't like, as it doesn't cover the golems, so Krugs. And it's perfectly possible that Riven or Tristana don't go past this ward through lane unless they recall in the red side jungle, in Edward Gaming's red side jungle, and go to lane. So it's very possible that after the 5-man invade, Tristana or Riven or whoever's going top lane might choose to go through Snake's blue side jungle into the red side jungle and take this Krug, and that in that case this ward is going to do nothing. So it doesn't cover all the jungle path into lane, and it doesn't really provide much information. So
另一点跟大家要说一下，就是我们这个屏幕因为分辨率的问题，我们看不太到两边的召唤日记呢。这个稍微有点难过。
对，我现在是看不到两边召唤日记的，但是主要的画面的话还是可以分辨清楚的。
对，
现在看一下 Q 这里，
当然这些都不是事儿。
Okay, so these pauses are quite annoying, but remember that sort of this game started nearly 4 hours later than it did. They had a lot of technical difficulties. Okay, so end of.
好，比赛回来。
现场的观众真的是又爆发出一些掌声。
This is one of the disadvantages to having. So the LPL is all held in Shanghai, but Demacia Cup is used as sort of like a road tour where teams have the opportunity to go and play tournaments in other major cities. But this does mean that whereas the LPL broadcast is generally quite good, a lot of these other minor cities and other broadcasters are not as used to having problem-free tournaments, and this has plagued the Demacia Cup. So I'm just going to pause for a little bit here. So I'm just going to pause here to talk a little bit about this early game. So Snake do a very standard. I wish there was a way that I could hide this. So Snake do a very standard double jungler start with the bot lane starting on golems. So in preparation, to get the early level 2, whereas Edward Gaming do something quite interesting. So here we see, so Hecarim helps with the red buff, but after sort of pulling the red buff and dealing a little bit of damage to it, Hecarim immediately goes to Raptors and solos the Raptors, and then goes to Edward Gaming's Wolves without splitting EXP. So he gets solo EXP and gold from the Raptors and the Wolves. And Gragas, and this is to help him get an advantage in the bot lane. So Gragas, on the other hand, paths to Krugs and then goes down to blue. And then immediately recalls with Alistair to match the sort of push which is going to happen in the bot lane. So why do Edward Gaming do this? Firstly, this pathing gets Hecarim ahead in the 1v1 matchup, as he's going to have gained solo EXP from 2 jungle caps. And Hecarim can do this because he has solid area of effect clear. Secondly, Edward Gaming's bot lane don't take the Gromp as they have to freeze top in a lane swap scenario. So Kog'Maw can't push as hard as Tristana does early, so Edward Gaming are essentially sacrificing a tower advantage early for their compositional advantage late, because they've opted into the lane swap. So if the lane, and the problem with this is, if the lane doesn't freeze pop properly due to random minion pathing in the top side, it could be disastrous for what Edward Gaming are trying to do. Edward Gaming have to freeze this lane top because they can't push it into tower fast enough, and if they don't push it into tower fast enough, it's very possible that Fiora is going to be able to teleport top, especially as it's not really profitable for Edward Gaming's top and jungler to remain in this side of the map after they farmed it. From this side of the map after they farmed it out. So they can't really afford to take Gromp because they risk basically the lane pushing towards them, which would be a disaster. Finally, by sending the jungler and support to the bot lane, they can ensure that the lane isn't going to be frozen against Hecarim once the tower falls. So although Edward Gaming lose the tower, the Hecarim, by doing this lane swap, they put Hecarim in a great position. So okay, so he played out. So he's going to come to lane with an additional cloth armor, which a level advantage, and once jungler and support appear bot, they can either zone the Riven from experience, force a recall if Riven wants to be able to fight Hecarim, so they gain a teleport advantage in exchange for the tower, or they can, if the wave is, or they can manage the wave to push the wave into tower and then try to either dive the Riven or something else. So they give themselves a lot of flexibility. One of the reasons why Kog'Maw, why sort of Korean, why when we talk about a Korean style lane swap, we talk about how the AD carries like to freeze the lane top, is because this is the sort of situation where Kog'Maw excels in. Kog'Maw can't push the tower very quickly, and he wants to sort of gain gold safely until he gets his Triforce. You can fight with a Sheen, but basically with Kog'Maw, what really matters is Triforce, get Triforce, poke around objectives, siege down towers, but basically wait until you get your Triforce fast. Okay. So here you see what I was talking about. You have the Hecarim coming to lane with an additional clock armor, and the bottom lane goes and teleports top.
厂长跟 Miko 都在附近。
现在 Miko 跟厂长的双游，我感觉要带一下节奏了。
So Hecarim has an advantage lead on Riven. He has an additional item, and Riven has to recall, or he's not going to be able to duel Hecarim. So here you see Alistar appearing, just in case the jungler is around. They can be pretty sure that Tristana and Braum have gone top lane. And you see that once Alistar has done his job here, which is to ensure that the wave pushes into tower and resets, he can immediately go back to top lane. So that's what Mako's been doing in his early game. And this is one of the reasons why I consider Mako to be one of the best supports in the world, because he's very, very good at being in the right place at the right time. He's not one of those supports who generally makes flashy plays, but always makes the right choice and make sure that he's in the right place. A bit poor here by Death. Shouldn't really have gone and taken that trade until Alistar came to lane, but. So remember, Hecarim has an item advantage now, and he has a level advantage. And Riven basically can't duel him, so you see Riven recalling here, and has to teleport back to lane in order to avoid missing 2 minion waves worth of CS. And so, although Edward Gaming have lost the tower on the bottom side, they have gained a teleport advantage, which stops this dive happening top, because there was a low Kog'Maw and Alistar, but Rek'Sai, Tristana and Braum cannot dive him because Hecarim has teleport, whereas Riven doesn't, so it would be foolish to dive. 双招跟那个经济的情况，对，麻烦我们的工作人员帮我调试一下。是的，
这个问题在16比9的电视上经常会出现。
不要着急，看不到。哎，这边打下点燃，
但是 Koro 这一波有点
So
打不过。
here we see Riven lose the all-in. So Riven loses the all-in here, and it's easy to blame Flandre's over-aggression. However, Riven is under pressure sort of to snowball this game, as Hecarim is going to be more powerful as the game progresses, and provides more as a tank in teamfights, especially as Snake have no Ignite to counter his healing off W. Which is a mistake in my opinion, because Braum is never going to be able to get in range to exhaust the Kog'Maw, and who else is he exhausting? Lulu? And Hecarim is almost certain to build some amount of tankiness, so they don't necessarily need the exhaust against Hecarim. And this is where sort of we see this 1v1, Hecarim winning this 1v1, is where we see Edward Gaming's early game pay off. So Hecarim wins because he's a level ahead due to taking 2 early jungle camps, and he has Ignite, due to the early game roam from Mako and Clearlove, Riven hasn't been able to freeze this wave. It's bounced off the turret, and he's had to use his teleport. So the issue Riven has, however, is that if she doesn't duel Hecarim and try to force something, what is Riven going to do in this lane? Hecarim has the sustain advantage due to Flask and early home guards, which he's going to be able to get very, very soon. There's no tower to push in the bottom lane because it's already gone. Tristana's already taken it. Riven can't even really roam mid unless Lulu plays very, very unsafely. So Edward Gaming give up a tower, but they attack the key part of Snake's early game play, which is to get Flandre ahead. So it goes without saying at this point, basically Riven's in an extremely big trouble, as she's used her TVP to go to lane already, misses out, well, doesn't miss out because Hecarim has the recall, but has given up first blood and is in a huge amount of trouble. Hecarim still has the teleport advantage. So here, so second buffs are coming up, and at this point the map is inverted from what it was at the start. So Edward Gaming are strong on the bottom side of the map, as Hecarim's ahead of Riven because of his first blood, and on the top side here, Tristana and Braum are more powerful than Kog'Maw and Alistar, especially as Kog'Maw took all that damage early. So the top side of the map is stronger for Snake, and the bottom side is stronger for Edward Gaming. So yeah, so Snake make the right play here. They sort of contest the blue bluff, and although they've given up first blood, sort of Snake's early advantage is off this Avarice Blade here, Contrast Tongue. So it's not really, it doesn't, yeah. So it's more champion power rather than item, item discrepancy. So rather than contesting this blue buff, Clearlove realizes this and invades blue rather than trying to hand over Edward Gaming's blue buff. They invade here and hand over blue buff to Lulu, because I mean they're weaker on that side of the map. So it's not, and there's nothing Snake could do to contest this. So this is quite smart. So Snake, no. I'm just going to pause for a little bit here. So once they see Lulu leave the lane, they know that Riven is in danger of being dove here, because Lulu is out of lane, so must be at Snake's blue buff, and assume Gragas is handing it over. So this means that there's a 3v1 on the bottom side of the map, and this means that Riven is in danger of being dove under the tower, and if they dive Riven under the tower, Riven's going to be even further behind. And so you see Rek'Sai immediately ult to get onto this side of the map. So this is smart sort of heads-up jungling, which might have saved a kill, and definitely allowed Riven to stay in lane without having to retreat from tower and risk losing more waves. So that's very good play from Steph. And good play from Clearlove as well to realise where the strength in the team are and that he should be invading. That stun there is quite ballsy from Flandre, so Koro recall, but I mean, he can do it, but it's a bit ballsy. Because I mean, if the jungler is there, he's going to give up another kill, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So Koro recalls now. I actually want to rewind this a little bit. So Koro recalls because this shows why Edward Gaming are considered to have one of the best sort of early games. Okay, so Koro recalls now. He's in base, and he waits in base for a good 15 seconds here, which shows that Edward Gaming are planning to sort of set up a play, although nothing happens. This is the mark. So what do they do with this 15 seconds? They use this time when he's in base. Well, I'm going to talk about that. So they take advantage of every opportunity. So they know Hecarim's going to recall. They know he's going to get his home guards, and because of this, they know that they have quite a lot of strength around the map, and they use this to allow Lulu and Gragas to push into the Snake's red side jungle and set up deep wards. And Hecarim stays in base for this amount of time and recalls at this exact time in order that they can get these deep wards down here, which is a smart use of the Hecarim from Edward Gaming. So I'll just talk a little bit about why they do that. So he recalls at this point, sort of in a neutral lane, in order to allow the lane to push to him, which is going to, and these deep wards that they're about to place, are to allow Edward Gaming to push topside, and either force Snake to commit resources top, in which case they can take Dragon, or to take more likely to just take the top tower. So here you can see the Hecarim in base, and they use that time to go and get some vision control. And sort of when analysts sort of talk about why Clearlove is one of the top junglers in the world, it's plays like this which they talk about synergy with the team rather than his raw mechanical ability. So you can see that this is a play that Edward Gaming set up in order to get their deep vision down. So, and just generally good macro play. So here, note the two wards here, which have been gained by Hecarim's sort of 15-second wait in the fountain in base. And they're about to spot this Riven roam here, which means that Edward Gaming send 3 people top to prevent a lane freeze, and Hecarim immediately hard pushes the bot. So you see Hecarim is freezing the lane here on the bottom side. They spot Riven top side, and Hecarim immediately pushes, and then you have Gragas immediately goes to the top side. So the top side tower.
雷德这边开始配合队友推塔了，斯内克这个阵容一定要把塔推起来。是阳哥在旁边埋伏，这一波很关键，场上一个炸回来一个艾拉。 但是艾拉这边又是双连顶，伤害应该是够的，加一口治疗没死。
So that's sort of a misplay on the teleport, which undoes a lot of the hard work of that. But I mean, you can see what Edward Gaming are thinking, even if they don't necessarily carry it out.
被 W 是抵了很多的伤害啊，往后跳一下应该是杀不了了。 这一波 Snake 是取得了一个人头优势。
He shouldn't have been teleporting to tower. He should have teleported to a minion. But it doesn't matter because Hecarim's still going to get the bottom tower, and he's going to get solo HP and more solo farm, so he's going to be even further ahead of him. So you can see anyway what the advantage of that Hecarim, even though it sort of.
这个选择好果断啊！
对，他是看到申阳哥追太深之后，直接回头就给。
So remember where Edward Gaming's strength at the moment is in the Hecarim, but rather than using this to get a tower, the Hecarim focus on getting the opportunity to farm to Triforce, not to get the early dragon. Because they could easily send, once they see Tristana here, they can easily send everybody to Dragon and just go and take Dragon. But again, the goal is to play a passive early game. They're not giving up, dragons or anything, so it's perfectly fine, and they're just sort of farming it out and waiting for Kog'Maw's Triforce.
现在的话，那个还是想带节奏。他们刚推塔，我觉得是推的还蛮着急的，差一点被 EDG 逮到机会。刚刚其实我没有看到 Koro 还是那个露露用的。 传送，因为我们这边看不到传送的一个画面，对，不知道谁没下来。我觉得那波，哎，这边要打小龙了，胆子有点大。Koro 现在状态还不错，
而且 Koro 这一波的装备跟进场杀伤力很强的。
对，先骚扰一下，
顶一波给点燃，这边赶紧挖洞。
So I mean, this play here is pretty frustrating actually, because all of Edward Gaming's sort of strong map play and early game control. Remember that this is an LPL fixture. And sometimes you do see some sort of stupid over-aggressive plays do happen. We've seen two here in sort of the last 2 minutes, one for each top laner, just sort of Riven diving the tower and Hecarim there. Luckily Rek'Sai's too low for Snake to take the dragon, but this basically gives up the dragon because it means that Edward Gaming lose all pressure and vision around the dragon, especially as Kog has no sort of Triforce, but although he will see. Commentators make quite a funny comment here about how Koro goes in and finds the rest of the team there, leading to a little problem. I mean, they talk about your one team, which means that has a problem. But anyway, yes, I mean, that's what happens if you rush in trying to over-aggressively get a kill and without proper vision. It's actually, but that dragon here is almost a steal if we look closely here. There you go. So it's on 15. Missed by 15 HP. So Snake actually do get a bit lucky there. But never mind.
拿了一个小龙，是的，就差15滴血，毕竟是一个，只是一个1级的大招。
感觉雷克赛刚才因为是这个减速惩戒，所以说
Yeah, that was just a bad spike. If they lost that dragon, that would have been disastrous for Snake. Because Snake need to find a way to force fights on Edward Gaming, and one of the ways they can do this is to late game dragons, stacking dragons. So we see here now that the gold is pretty much tied, even though Snake are a tower up. But note the advantages. There's a 22 CS advantage on Hecarim, 13 CS advantage on Gragas, 20 CS advantage on Kog'Maw. Snake are in quite a lot of trouble here, as Edward Gaming are about to exit their power trough in the early game. And Edward Gaming have just sort of farmed this game out methodically, except for a pretty boneheaded play by Koro. They've been pretty methodical. They understand how they need to win this game, which is they need to get Kog'Maw, Triforce, siege remaining outer turrets, and just play a controlled game. Don't get into any fights until you reach your power spike.
日文打人马有点打不了，这人马出的这3件装备，日文都不太想看到。
我感觉这每一件都挺要命的，关键是他之前你说光有冰心跟这个布甲鞋头，日文还可以上去消耗一下，但现在就是人马转你一下，哎 ，A 你一下。
这边 在拼，艾拉还是在这边做一下视野。优这边回家也没有装备啊，他现在是15分钟，能在20分钟出头能把中亚做出来是极好的。我看他这个情况，哦，已经有个大棒。现在抠着作战能力很强啊，我觉得 EDG
So
要
here
不
you
要
see
强
Hecarim
势点来打？
being
有
ahead
点太喜欢
and can
去
pressure Riven off
帮
the
这个
wave.
Dev 这边去打了。
其实
Has a
我是觉
huge
得
CS advantage.
现在 EDG 这边想法是什么？就是把 Koro 这个点很肥扔在上路，然后配合 Dev 一起赶紧把上塔推了。
啊，这边
因为你现在上塔一直拆不掉，对于 EDG 来讲是前期节奏很大的一个。
And you see, Kog'Maw has his Triforce now, and they immediately go and siege the outer towers. And this is going to give them the gold advantage.
冰女跟小炮都不在。
And the best thing is, because that they have a Hecarim, they don't need to use teleport.
艺高人胆大，还想
Okay, so they split the gold
经验。
between AD carry and. But this Tristana split push in the bottom lane, because they have a Hecarim, they don't need to use teleport or anything. He can just home guards out of base directly and stop this split.
回走是很喜欢这样打的，队友去干他们的事情，然后我这边自己偷着发育。
对，然后等到团战的时候再站出来。
小炮的推塔能力也是非常的强。 两边陷入了一个瓶颈期吧，现在也打不起来。
So,
这边要开吗？有牛头在场的话，优应该是
if
开不
we
了
if
的。
we watch Hecarim, so there's no reason sort of to hard push this wave from Hecarim. So what Koro is going to do is he's going to freeze the wave, and then he's going to set up a slow push in a couple of minutes to allow the wave to push to the tier 2 tower, so that Edward Gaming can pressure Baron. And this is something which Edward Gaming do quite a lot. So you see here, just freezing the lane, not doing anything, just allowing the lane to freeze. He doesn't want it to push now because we're 17 minutes in. He wants the lane to push it around 19 minutes so they can put the vision around Baron. So he can just leave the lane frozen on his side of the map, recall.
对，人马现在的3项做出来，然后再补充一个冰心的话，我觉得他应该是可以迅速的去参战了。现在申江哥需要一个很长的补发育时间。反正瑞文这盘真的是很难发挥了。这个英雄的特性就是线上没优势，就是被一倍的压。看一下经济上
just sort of freeze again, just sort of freezing the wave.
然后其他位置上的话差不多。对。
And Edward Gaming just doing Edward Gaming things. And this is one of the reasons why they're so strong around Baron, because they know how they freeze the wave at the right time, and they force champions to be at certain points of the map at the right time in the game to allow them to get the pressure that they want. So here we see Hecarim is pushing bot now, so that Edward Gaming have the opportunity to get Baron control at 20 minutes, or force a Riven TP. Then it doesn't mean they're going to take Baron, but it does mean that they can sort of force the other team to make unsafe sort of trades. So here you see 18 minutes. Hecarim recalls here. How long did he stay? 1, 2. Okay, so Hecarim doesn't actually. So he waits in base for a few seconds, but it's clear that they're not going to be able to fight because they don't have a good flanking ward for him to teleport to. So Baron spawns now in about 50 seconds. Edward Gaming have forced Riven bot side, so if they wanted to, they can now go in for forward ward control around Baron. However, they don't end up going for it, but the timing is very typical for how Edward Gaming played the game. So at this point here, because of that slow push that Hecarim set up 2 minutes ago, they can easily now go in for the ward control they want around Baron. They don't do it, but if they wanted to, they could.
那波再打不过的话，拖到后期的话就很难赢的。而且你记不记得在最开始，虽然这可能对观众来说已经过去4、5个小时啊，最开始我们就讲到，在 EDG 这种队伍，你跟他第一局打，一旦被他这种非常善用的套路打赢之后，后面可能缓不过来，很难打，对，缓不过来，因为很难打。而且对于 EDG 来讲，一旦自己熟悉套路赢了，他后面会越来越轻车熟路，越来越轻车熟路。
So again, once Kog'Maw has his power spike, they group and siege mid tower. This is a very powerful 4-man unit from Edward Gaming. Gragas, Lulu, Kog'Maw, Alistar. There's nothing that's a huge amount of long-range poke, and there's nothing that sort of Snake can. Well, it's not. It's very difficult for Snake to close in on this composition without a good plan. this is Juggernaut sort of being played at its best.
配合着露露的一个皮克斯，再加上活体大炮，哇，好痛！
我们发现直接把2个人全打残了，这真的 CR 跟 Crystal 的血量都很残，被打的，
已经进入到 EDG 的节奏了，可以说。现在就等 Snake 那一波，我觉得就等幽神跟圣阳哥那一波，那波就是他们可能唯一一波有机会。
There's so much disengage.
这样拖下去的话，真的太难受了，我觉得。
This is why you should pick the Alistair first rotation instead of picking Crystal.
就是把你人点光，我不动了，我先推塔。
塔
推掉一会儿，就算你回来了，我们在龙区你没塔，你还是打不过
我。
So
here we see sort of a barrel being used there from clear love as poke. I mean that basically secures the tower. And they can possibly go for the dragon here. In the end, they give up the dragon, which is fine. The second dragon isn't really worth anything. And Edward Gaming's composition is scaling up, and they don't really prioritize dragons anyway. But I think Edward Gaming, after they sort of use that ultimate to get Braum low, could definitely have fought over this dragon, especially as they have the poke advantage. But they don't need to fight. So I mean, the longer the game goes on, the better it is for Edward Gaming. So they don't have to fight it. Especially because the Gragas ult is down, but you know, they use the secure tower.
上路的 Coral 已经做到了3项，而且这个时候瑞文的装备跟他
打不过，
对，没法比了，
这很简单打不过。现在 Coral 在上路已然无敌，过来一个小瑞文，
哎，
好难受啊！这确实拿出瑞文这样的英雄就是没有回头路的。
So here we see a sort of second mistake from Coral. He has no ward coverage to stay for these golems. And all lanes are pushed, but all lanes are pushed, so Snake can't get anything from it, but there's no way he should be on the side of the map. I mean, that's just a mistake. Which is a bit frustrating, I guess, to watch, because Edward Gaming have done so much to get him ahead, and he just gives Riven a kill. You know, just through stupidity. But you know, this is just bad decision making, but the strategic thing is so, let's talk about this. So here you see both of the damage dealers teleporting to the same ward to the flank. You have a good Gragas barrel here, which displaces both damage threats, and Edward Gaming just need to buy time at this point because Snake has used everything and Hecarim is going to be respawning with Cone Guards very soon. Then you see here Edward Gaming punishing Snake's over aggression, and that's a very good political answer to capture Tilted. So it's very easy here to criticize sort of Snake's over aggression here, but Snake have to make these aggressive plays because they're so far behind. They're behind on gold, and they're in terms of composition, their composition is just going to get massively outscaled in the late game. So they have to make plays, and they have to make aggressive plays, and this is just punishing that sort of aggression. They're going to have a replay of the game here, so I'm going to go and talk a little bit about that. Note that they both... Okay, so here we see the original engage. Both damage dealers teleport to the same ward to hide that they're both coming in. Alistair zones out the front line here. Very, very good engage over the wall from you. But Cogmore is able to survive and sort of output all that DPS due to Lulu. And so this is a very, very powerful Cog now. And this is sort of deft, sort of maximizing the amount of damage you can put out with Cogmore. Now Crystal goes in aggressive, which you can argue is a mistake, which ends up costing two kills. But I don't think it's necessarily that bad to jump in here. Maybe it's a miscommunication, but they have to make aggressive plays because otherwise, like they had the opportunity for fight and they're trying to maximize their gains. Like I mean, they could have just reset into lane maybe, but this is a really, really good Griff. Essentially gets 2 kills.
我是觉得刚才他如果站在那个艾拉的筒子后面，好像那个墙后面还有点机会。
真是一头野马啊！还好这一波扣是没有大伤，没有造成更加惨重的一个损失。哎，世强哥这边感觉有点危险啊。
So here sort of you see the advantage of Lulu and Cog. Like Lulu and Cog together are scary. Like, yeah, I mean, Lulu speed up and boost
脱
to
缰
auto
的野
attacks.
马，
这个马子，
关键这马身上带了一团火，
主要这个视觉效果有点可怕，我觉得。
是的，直接把他点
just
死
kept
了
the
点
catch.
燃。
这场比赛在前24分钟打的还是非常的激烈的 ，Koro 现在无疑是场上的一个焦点，他现在只要是出场就感觉很有震撼视觉的这种效果。
对，气势汹汹。
I'm sad that they don't have the icons anymore
对线
now
去
the
完
world's
成一个
finished.
单杀到现在 ，Koro 的表现都非常的不错。
Never
中路
mind.
二塔也顺势被拔掉，此时 EDG 的经济应该是领先的。
So here we go and see Edward Gaming setting up around Baron, setting up vision around Baron. Edward Gaming are known as a team which basically aggressively takes early Barons. So this actually does, they have a reputation, so this puts a huge amount of pressure on Stock. So they're setting up the bait, but they're seen by this ward here.
再找到一个机会打一个以多打少的机会。
你知道主要还有一个问题是什么吗？盛阳哥闪现用了刚才。
对，
这大家如果是
So they know they're in that
日文
bush,
的玩家应该知道
basically,
日文
or
很
they can
吃闪
guess.
现，尤其在中后期。对，这边
So as a result, I had no idea what on earth Braum was doing here. So Snake know he's in the bush, but the Snake composition has no real tank to face check the bush. So yes, that's awkward. So they know that they've seen him go into the bush, but they don't know whether they're still in the bush or whether they're going for Baron or something. But it's an extremely risky play to make. But this is one of the weaknesses of the Snake's team composition. They've got nobody to go and face check that bush.
格强给 David 拿一个红，这个时候以 EDG 的惯打法，
盛香哥胆子有点大，只能说这边我觉得有点危险啊，两个恐惧，边打边跑，魁死输出。
So this would be a beautiful engage if Braum was still up. So I mean, this shows you. So he gets a 4-person ultimate into what's Lissandra W called? E called, sorry. Oh, I can't remember. So he gets a beautiful engage, and if you can imagine Braum just ulting across that, but unfortunately there's nothing they can do to stop Edward Gaming taking Baron after they lose this fight. It's close, but Riven is too far behind, and they just don't have enough. They don't have enough damage.
感觉 Snake 有点大势已去了。
不是，刚才这一波有点迷啊，就是
确实有点迷，
在自己的辅助已经死了的情况下，而且那个地方有视野的，
真的，他就沈阳光他是知道了，而且一个瑞文他用第3段 Q 还是进场的。
你别说，先看这一波 ZZR 有没有机会力挽狂澜。
ZZR
就这一波了，蓝色边的有老牛的 ZZR 不好下去
来了，
没顶出去，没顶出去。
Yeah, so there's no excuse here. This steal shouldn't really have happened. However, it only really delays the game because Edward Gaming has sort of already won this game through their play in the first 20 minutes. They're just getting a little bit sloppy and closing out. But again, note because of the good wave control, Edward Gaming's good wave control, there's no objectives Snake can immediately punish them for. And Edward Gaming still have a massive team fighting edge. So they lose the Baron, but I mean that just delays the game. That's all it does. I mean they're still ahead compositionally, and it's not easy for Snake to see. And even despite the goal from Baron, they're still catching a win. But sure, I mean that still shouldn't have happened.
大家应该听到了，比如说Snake 大势已去了，好，这样龙抢到了。
现场猪仔要砍我了，别这样。ED 现在其实还是有优势，
不是就。
I mean, I think in particular it was their jungle start which got them ahead in the early game. So the first 5 minutes sort of the game where they rotated jungle and bottom lane, gave up the tower and put Heku in a lead in the bottom lane.
这是本场比赛 EDG 的第一条小龙。
哎，现在小龙真的没人拿，你发现没有？现在就是。 拿条小龙，我真的觉得一点作用都没有。哦，这边看下第一视角操作。
Yeah, I mean, they should have Alistair next to that wall to sort of headbutt him.
是谁的喊声？感觉像水晶还是眩晕的。现在 ED 又是卷土重来，即便你有大龙 buff， 我还是要上来推。红 buff 点你2下，哇，太强势了，好痛！让一个火体大炮。
Even though they have the Baron buff, it's super hard for them to defend against the
就是 Dift 在拿到大的时候最喜欢这种情况，就是什么露露给个盾上去开个 W 点，给个盾开个 W 点，你要强开有牛，你不强开我就耗。你看这边，而且上路的话，因为 Koro 太顺了，选军这边直接上来想打，但是被人马打了一套之后，发现两个人根本不是一个量级的，
打不过。
这有什么那个拳击比赛？
对，那边是次轻量级，那边是超重量级，
那边200公斤级。
现在 EDE 这边还是要推，就仗着这边大嘴的强势。 哇，好难受！
布隆上来及时开盾顶一下，但 Dift 这边已经如入无人之境了呀！
这真的是单枪匹马，一夫当关。 反击，但是挡不住啊，又顶了一下 ，Deft 没有被打起来。这边看看立藏中的进场 ，W 的2个人要伸向 Mako。这边 Koro 什么时候来？哎，来有点顶不住了，两边辅助互换吗？回头被顶回来，2连顶，这波配合非常的漂亮 ，Deft 秒掉了 Crystal。啊，这边又是需要一个闪现，又是被露露拿到一个人头，又是那边用一技能跑掉 ，EDG 是拿到了一波0换2。
Yeah, Deft is pretty good. That's all there is to say about that. I mean, this is sort of compositional advantage. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. I mean, it's a bad fight, but it's never going to get better once Hecarim grouped with the team and Baron buff stat bonus is gone. So I mean, they have to try to make a play here, and it didn't work out because their team composition is really, really bad, and that's the fault of pick. So I want to talk about this fight. So this is Snake's team fighting at its best. Basically, despite being all this gold behind, despite being all these stats down, they managed to win a fight. And I'm going to cover this fight. Yeah, so they go 4 for 1 in this fight. And how they do this is actually quite smart. And this is one of the reasons why Snake are one of my favorite teams to watch in the game. So let's go and watch this fight in different parts. So first we see the Riven engage. So Riven goes in. Okay. So this is a really good engage from Riven here, punishing the small misposition here from Edward Gaming frontline. The fact that they're both grouped together and that they're split from the rest of their team. Okay. Next, Lissandra's presence here in the fight zones out the 2 damage dealers. Well, sorry, zones out specifically the Kog'Maw and the Lulu. So he can't go in to help the front line, because if Kog'Maw comes in here, Lissandra's immediately going to claw into ultimate. So he can't go in to help his front line, which has been split. So at this point, they pretty much won the fight. Just punishing, yeah, and then they use the mobility from Riven to get a good chase down, and basically they just get What Koro does here is quite smart. He gets out the jungler, who has one of their globals to stop them being able to push. But again, notice how, yeah, so they win a team fight off the Riven engage into Lissandra's zone, which is well played. But they've got, because the top wave is pushing, the only thing they can go for is sort of this mid tier 2 tip, which I mean they take. Yeah, okay, I don't know what Kog'Maw's doing here. Maybe he was hoping to get a kill on Riven, but that's really... I've got nothing. Again, Edward Game is still massively ahead, despite losing a team fight and a tower and a kill. So it is a bit sloppy from Edward Gaming, but basically they won this game in big time. So it's just interesting to see how they try to close out this game. In the second game, sort of Snake are better to... Okay, so here we see a replay of the fight. Oh no, this is just a replay of the chase now. The key part of the fight happened back in the base, where Riven is able to get the engage on both frontline, on Hecarim and Gragas, and then Lissandra zones out. Anyway, the point is, although the execution has been poor, I think that this is sort of the difference between looking at the top LPL teams and the sort of how do I explain this? So, although although the execution is occasionally bad, and although they occasionally make stupid over-aggressive plays, you can see the logic behind the decision. Edward Gaming are very methodical, but the thing that separates Edward Gaming from a team like SK Telecom is that Edward Gaming will occasionally make ridiculously aggressive, plays that just make no sense. Even though they have knowledge of how to play the game really, really well, up there with all the top teams in the world. I mean, this is something which Clearlove and Mako, who are sort of the key to the pressure advantage that these teams have. Even so they're extremely good at sort of controlling the map. They make good plays with Hecarim. They take advantage of, in this game, they make good plays, keeping Hecarim in base for a large amount of time, etc. But again, you have the over-aggression occasionally punished. So, I think that's something which punishes them. So, but Edward Gaming's plan in this game anyway is to set up for second Baron and win off their second Baron. So we're going to see them set this up now. Watch Hecarim. Hecarim, there you see in the bot lane. When they want to set up the wards around Baron, they're going to recall the Hecarim and put him in base in preparation so that they have the ability. So when is Hecarim going to recall? So they take a dragon. It's not really a very, very relevant dragon here. It's just taking an objective off the map. Second recall? Yes, Hecarim has recalled. Okay, so this recall here is to sort of set up a slow push in preparation for the upcoming Baron fight because they want to force Riven to go and answer it. Note the CS prioritization from each team here. And the fact that Hecarim is almost 100 CS up over Riven, which is what giving up that tower early did. So, Lulu, of course, a very resource-light champion. Hecarim being able is one of the advantages of Hecarim, and one of the reasons he's one of my favorite champions to have in team compositions in the top lane, is that he can handle minion pushes in both bot and top side. So if you have a Hecarim which is very good at controlling minion waves, which of course is going to change for next season, you can set up slow pushes for both sides pretty much without giving up any pressure at all. So here you have Hecarim, he's going to freeze this lane, and then he's going to set up a slow push so that they can put pressure on the Baron. Once it's clear that Riven is going to answer. Okay. So once he doesn't see Riven, he's going to make sure that the wave is going to push. Remember that they have to send somebody to answer this because there's no bot lane towers anymore for there's no bot lane towers anymore. So once he doesn't see Riven, he just goes to a regular split push.
点对点，是的，摁下那个确认键，我们现在就可以享受到，可以看到召唤师技能的一个比赛了。观众现在一定非常诧异，我们两个到底在干什么？
Remember, Hecarim can recall and get straight to the Baron area if that's what Edward Gaming want to do. When do they slow push? Is that later on in the game? They're going to slow push later. Anyway, when we'll come to our shoot. This is sort of Edward Gaming's composition doing what it's supposed to do, sleeping very, very well, getting towers. And Cosmo Lulu is, Juggernaut compositions are very, very powerful if you play them correctly. So here, we see Koro waiting in base. Ah yes, this is one thing, okay. So note Koro recalls at this point. And he's going to wait in base here, he's still waiting in base. He ends up waiting in base, Hecarim ends up waiting in base all the time they take this power, and ends up in base for over 30 seconds, because of course Hecarim is much more powerful when he's in base, because you can use it to set up a home guard teleporting game. So still waiting in base, still waiting in base.
盛香哥这边又出了一个板甲，
是的，网板加血手。
And then eventually goes out once it's clear that Riven is pushing the wave in. But he's waiting in base for a huge amount of time, rather than farming golems or something. So.
对这个装备，我觉得现在上路说还蛮。 这个装备我觉得是几大合计里面比较好。
其实我觉得他现在出一个坚韧合计好，因为他现在没韧性。哎，下路劈起来。
Here we see the late game Riven at the point where Riven can duel Hecarim. But the problem is, you see, there's no way that Riven can catch up to Hecarim. You see, Hecarim is just faster, and this is one of the reasons why people think that Hecarim. So Riven using Riven's ult can win late game duels against Hecarim, but not without the ult. And Hecarim can choose the mode of engage because Hecarim's faster, so Hecarim can escape whenever he wants. So. And Riven had to burn a flash and ult and didn't get it. Although it was close, but I mean, it shows that, yeah, it just shows one of the reasons why. So Hecarim can duel Riven early because he can take Knight and clear jungle camps early, and then he can sort of escape from Riven in the late game. He also has a sustain advantage in the early game too.
现在是打出自信了
啊！这个位置还想再蹲一下。这个位置 Koro 走进来啊，沈阳哥走那边有眼，是的，
我应该是知道的。Koro 这边再出一个守望者铠甲。
So here we see EDG Gaming. They've set up around Baron. They're baiting Baron.
在疯狂的 pin 这条大龙，现在是胜负点，两边都不敢动。哎，你没状态，我欺负你。
So this is the thing, Hecarim has a speed advantage, so in the long lane, he's going to always be able to catch Riven and kill So basically Riven, so that's basically the video. So let's go and have a quick look at what happened. So this is both of Edward Gaming's advantages here. So they're baiting Baron, and if you look at the minimap, okay, then you will see, okay, we'll talk about the Riven duel first. So the Riven duel here, Riven can't afford to be pushed up this far down the lane with no ultimate. He has no ultimate, he has no flash. There's no way he can get away from this Hecarim. Hecarim is faster than she is, sorry. And Hecarim just chases Riven down and kills her. At the same time, so this is the split push winning. At the same time, Edward Gaming, who've denied all vision of here, managed to use Lulu and Kog'Maw to get a catch on Rek'Sai, and they're able to kill Rek'Sai as well. So both of these win kill advantages, the split push and the Baron pressure, pay off at the same time. Yeah, there's just nothing. Okay, so they chase the Rek'Sai all the way from the left side bush on mid lane, all the way to blue lane. And that's so this is not a flawless performance from Edward Gaming, but they played their composition out very, very well from the pick ban to put themselves in a position to win the game from that point, from once they survived the first 20 minutes of the game. So they had a very solid early game strat. They gave up the tower, but they put Hecarim ahead in bot lane and then relied on Lulu Kog'Maw to win late. This game also showed sort of both teams' strategic strengths. So Edward Gaming play very aggressively around Baron, use Hecarim recalls to set up deep vision, sort of get the vision control, prioritize the vision control. Where Snake, even at the points where they look good, it's Snake's team fighting, which gives them a chance, but they're too sort of handicapped by their sort of weaker vision control and team composition disadvantage to turn these advantages into the win. So they won the fight by the red, sorry, by their bottom side inhibitor, thanks to the Riven engage into Lissandra zone, but they're unable to turn their team fight advantage into a victory. So I will talk a little bit about how Snake team fight very, very well in the second video. So that's the first in the series. Thank you for watching, and I will post the second video as soon as I finish.